It's been another bad day for US stocks, with markets dropping again on Tuesday amid uncertainty caused by US President Donald Trump's sweeping trade tariffs.
The announcement by the newly elected U.S. president sparked a dramatic realignment in the global energy market that reverberated through international trade corridors, reshaping the dynamics of liquefied natural gas LNG exports and imports. The unilateral decision to impose tariffs on trade partners sent shockwaves through established economic relationships, leading to a swift and unequivocal response from one of the world's largest LNG consumers. China, long reliant on US LNG to meet its burgeoning energy needs, abruptly ceased its imports, a move that not only unsettled the long-term planning of the US energy sector, but also ushered in a substantial loss of revenue, estimated at $1.5 billion, into an industry that had once been regarded as a cornerstone of American energy prowess. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. This watershed moment, driven by a blend of ideological conviction and economic strategy, represented a significant departure from the status quo. In a climate where free market principles and open trade once formed the bedrock of global commerce, the imposition of tariffs was a clear signal of a retreat into protectionism. The decision underscored a broader political agenda that prioritized domestic economic interests, while at the same time challenging the norms that had long governed international energy trade. The resulting chain reaction was both swift and uncompromising. As China leveraged its own economic weight to enforce a counter-strategy, US LNG lost a crucial market, and the financial ramifications were felt immediately in the form of an estimated $1.5 billion loss in export revenue. The reverberations of this strategic move extended well beyond mere dollars and cents. At its core, the event represented an ideological pivot, a departure from a multilateral system of trade relationships towards a more unilateral, state-centric approach to economic policy. It reflected an era where political decisions are increasingly employed as instruments of economic statecraft, an approach that views trade not just as a source of revenue, but as a means of exerting geopolitical influence. The Chinese government's reaction, marked by the swift shutdown of US LNG imports, was emblematic of a broader willingness to recalibrate long-standing economic ties in response to what was perceived as unjust or unilateral economic coercion. This decisive move disrupted the established equilibrium within the global LNG market and highlighted the risks inherent in relying on politically sensitive supply chains. At the heart of this transformation was the realization that economic strategies rooted in protectionism often come with unintended and wide-ranging consequences. The tariffs, designed ostensibly to safeguard domestic industries and recalibrate trade balances, inadvertently undermined the stability of existing international agreements. In a global market where trust and long-term contracts often form the basis of economic cooperation, the sudden shift in policy rendered many of those agreements obsolete or significantly weakened. The ripple effects were immediate. Nations that had depended on a steady influx of US LNG were compelled to seek alternative sources to ensure energy security. This led to a realignment of trade flows that, in turn, facilitated the meteoric rise of Australia as the preeminent LNG supplier on the global stage. Australia's ascendance in the LNG market was not a mere accident of timing. Rather, it was the product of years of deliberate investment in state-of-the-art liquefaction facilities, expansive shipping infrastructure, and strategic positioning to serve burgeoning Asian markets. While the U.S. energy sector had long prided itself on technological innovation and market reach, the imposition of tariffs and the subsequent retaliatory measures unveiled vulnerabilities that had been lurking beneath the surface. The loss of a key trade partner like China opened the door for alternative suppliers who were not encumbered by the same political baggage or unpredictable policy shifts. Australia's ability to rapidly scale up exports and offer reliable supply underpinned its newfound dominance in the market, positioning it to set competitive prices and influence the global LNG trade in ways that had far-reaching economic and geopolitical implications. In the broader context of international economics, the sudden disruption in the LNG trade serves as a potent illustration of the fragility of interdependent markets when subject to abrupt policy shifts. The American economy, which had benefited from decades of integration into a global energy market characterized by stable, mutually beneficial agreements, suddenly found itself on the defensive. The loss of $1.5 billion in export revenue was emblematic not just of a temporary setback, but of a structural weakness, a clear indication that economic interdependence can quickly become a liability when used as a tool in political bargaining. The event underscored a critical lesson, that the strategic use of tariffs, while potentially effective in achieving short-term political objectives, can backfire by destabilizing well-established economic networks, leading to significant and sometimes irreversible financial losses. It is important to understand that the decision to impose tariffs was driven by a calculus that combined ideological stances with long-term economic strategy. Leaders at the highest levels of government often frame such decisions in the context of national sovereignty and the need to protect domestic industries from what are perceived as unfair trade practices. However, when the geopolitical landscape is so intricately tied to technological and economic infrastructures that have developed over decades, any abrupt change in policy can induce a level of market volatility that is difficult to predict or control. In this case, the tariff imposition was a deliberate move aimed at reorienting the trade balance. Yet it also exposed how deeply intertwined energy policies are with broader geopolitical strategies. The reaction from China demonstrated that in a world where economic strength is as much about relationships and stability as it is about raw production numbers, even a seemingly well-calculated policy shift can have unforeseen consequences. The ramifications for the US LNG industry were multifaceted. On one level, the immediate financial impact was measurable in billions of dollars lost in export revenue, a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities of a market that, despite its advanced technologies and expansive capacities, remained dependent on volatile international agreements. On another level, the reputational damage inflicted by such a dramatic policy move had the potential to influence future investment decisions and shake the confidence of international trading partners. Trust, once eroded, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild in markets where long-term contracts and reliability are paramount. The swift decision by China to curtail US LNG imports sent an unequivocal message. In an era where economic policy is weaponized as a tool of national strategy, trust can be the first, and perhaps the most fragile, victim. In addition to the financial and reputational costs, the event instigated a recalibration of the strategic landscape within the global energy sector. The downfall of US LNG exports and the simultaneous rise of Australian dominance illustrated that market leadership is contingent not only on production capabilities but also on the ability to navigate the labyrinth of geopolitics with agility and foresight. Energy security has evolved into a multi-dimensional challenge that encompasses not just the physical aspects of resource production and distribution, but also the unpredictable nature of political decision-making. Nations now face the dual challenge of ensuring that their energy policies align with domestic priorities, while also maintaining the international confidence necessary to uphold lucrative trade agreements. The disruption of US LNG exports is a case in point. An over-reliance on politically sensitive trade relationships can precipitate abrupt market reversals, leaving countries scrambling to forge new alliances under less favorable economic conditions. The interplay between domestic policy and international market dynamics is a recurring theme in the modern economic landscape. The event highlighted how the strategic imposition of tariffs and protectionist measures can engender immediate market shifts that reverberate far beyond the borders of any single nation. The loss of a major trading partner is not an isolated incident. Rather, it is a symptom of a broader trend where nations are increasingly inclined to leverage economic power as a component of their geopolitical strategy. In this context, economic policies cannot be viewed in isolation but must be understood as part of a complex web of international relations, where every decision carries the potential for unintended consequences. The recalibration of the LNG market thus serves as a powerful reminder that in an interconnected global economy, stability and predictability are the currencies of trust and long-term cooperation. The significance of Australia's rise in this context cannot be overstated. With a history of investing steadily in energy infrastructure and a strategic geographic position that makes it a natural supplier for the fast-growing Asian markets, Australia's emergence as a dominant player in the LNG market embodies the strategic advantage of foresight and adaptability. As established relationships between the US and China became strained, Australia was uniquely positioned to fill the resultant void. The nation's LNG export facilities, designed to meet the rigorous demands of a competitive global market, were able to capitalize on the sudden shift in trade flows, thereby securing a foothold that promised not only immediate economic gains, but also long-term strategic benefits. This shift in market dynamics is emblematic of a broader trend in which countries that are prepared to invest in resilient, future-proof infrastructures are better positioned to navigate the tumultuous waters of international trade. The economic narrative that unfolded in this episode is as much about the inherent vulnerabilities of protectionist policies as it is about the promise of strategic realignment. The U.S. energy sector, built on decades of investment in LNG export capabilities, faced a sudden and unwelcome challenge when China redirected its purchasing decisions in response to new tariff policies. The calculated decision by Chinese authorities to halt imports from the U.S. was not merely a reaction to economic incentives, but a strategic maneuver aimed at compelling a reconfiguration of power within the energy trade network. In effect, the move signaled that long-standing trade relationships were subject to rapid change when higher political stakes were introduced, and that nations were willing to abandon established partners in favor of more reliable and strategically aligned suppliers. The implications of this event extend well into the realm of economic theory and the practical realities of market behavior. In a perfectly competitive market, the sudden imposition of tariffs would typically lead to adjustments in supply and demand, with prices adjusting accordingly to restore equilibrium. However, the reality of global energy markets is much more complex. The interplay between political decisions and economic behavior can lead to outcomes that deviate significantly from classical economic models. The disruption of US LNG exports illustrates how factors beyond pure market economics, namely the strategic use of tariffs as instruments of political power, can derail established market equilibria and force rapid, sometimes irreversible shifts in trade patterns. The resulting $1.5 billion loss is a stark quantification of the risks associated with such policy decisions and serves as a cautionary tale for governments seeking to balance domestic priorities with international obligations. At its core, the incident underscores the critical importance of strategic alignment in international trade. The interdependency inherent in modern economic systems means that unilateral policy decisions can have cascading effects that extend far beyond their immediate targets. When a key exporter like the United States finds itself isolated due to politicized measures, the consequences are immediately felt across industries, from raw material extraction to high-technology infrastructure projects. The recalibration of the LNG market following China's decisive move reveals a fundamental truth about contemporary trade, that success and stability depend not solely on production capacities, but equally on the strength and reliability of long-term international partnerships. The broader implications of this event also reverberate in the spheres of economic diplomacy and international relations. The strategic use of tariffs and retaliatory trade policies has long been a feature of geopolitical competition. But the rapid unraveling of previously reliable trade relationships in this instance highlights the increasing potency of these measures in an era of heightened global uncertainty. Leaders on both sides of the Atlantic now face the formidable challenge of reconciling domestic policy goals with the imperatives of a deeply integrated world economy. As the energy market continues to evolve under the influence of these powerful geopolitical forces, nations will need to adopt strategies that are both agile and robust, capable of withstanding the shocks inherent in a rapidly shifting economic environment. The dramatic realignment of the LNG market that unfolded with China's shutdown of U.S. imports can be read as a broader commentary on the state of international trade in the modern era. The event reflects a world in which economic policies are increasingly intertwined with geopolitical ambitions, where strategic maneuvers are not merely about numerical gains or losses, but about asserting national dominance and safeguarding sovereign interests. By abruptly terminating its LNG imports from the United States, China demonstrated both its willingness and its ability to leverage economic relationships in pursuit of broader geopolitical objectives. The resulting financial loss and the rapid rise of alternative suppliers like Australia serve as a profound reminder that in today's complex global landscape, market positions can shift with startling speed when political imperatives take precedence over economic considerations. This recalibration also casts a long shadow over the future strategic positioning of nations in the energy sector. The US, having long been a central player in the LNG export market, now faces the daunting task of reassessing its strategic priorities in light of an increasingly volatile geopolitical environment. The scale of the financial setback, $1.5 billion in lost revenue, is a quantifiable measure of how quickly political decisions can erode even the most well-established economic sectors. It forces policymakers and industry leaders alike to grapple with fundamental questions about the sustainability of reliance on politically sensitive export markets, and the extent to which a nation's economic security is tied to the stability of its international alliances. In many respects, the incident is emblematic of the broader tensions that have come to define international trade in recent years. As nations have increasingly turned inward and embraced protectionist policies, long-standing global networks have been put to the test. The unilateral imposition of tariffs, while designed to protect domestic markets, has the potential to disrupt the intricate web of trade relationships that underpin modern economies. When even a single link in this chain, such as the US LNG exports, is weakened, the entire network can experience significant strain, leading to the kind of cascading disruptions that were witnessed in this episode. The strategic implications are profound, calling for a renewed understanding of the interplay between economic policy and global market dynamics. Amidst the turbulence, the contrasting fortunes of the United States and Australia offer a vivid illustration of the divergent outcomes that can arise from differing strategic approaches. While the US grappled with the fallout from its protectionist measures, Australia's long-term investments in LNG infrastructure positioned it to capture a rapidly expanding share of the global market. The country's emergence as the dominant supplier was not merely a consequence of opportunistic market forces. It was the result of deliberate, forward-looking investments in production capacity, logistics, and international trade networks. In a landscape where reliability and stability are paramount, Australia's rapid ascent serves as a testament to the importance of strategic planning and the ability to adapt to evolving market conditions. The episode has laid bare the intricacies of international trade, particularly in sectors as strategically important and technically demanding as LNG. Energy markets are predicated on a delicate balance of supply, demand, and political cooperation, a balance that can be disrupted by rapid unilateral policy shifts. The dramatic reconfiguration of the LNG market underlines the fact that no single nation operates in isolation. The economic fortunes of one country are inextricably linked to the actions and reactions of others. This interconnectedness means that policy decisions taken at the national level can quickly ripple outward, affecting industries, markets, and international alliances in ways that defy simple economic forecasts. By scrutinizing the unfolding of this event, it becomes evident that the strategic miscalculation embedded in the tariff imposition had far-reaching consequences. The abrupt cessation of US LNG exports to China serves as a sobering reminder that in a highly interdependent global economy, even well-intentioned policy measures can trigger chain reactions that jeopardize long-term economic stability. The $1.5 billion loss not only reflects a significant financial blow, but also epitomizes a deeper structural vulnerability within the U.S. energy export sector. It highlights the critical importance of aligning domestic economic policies with the nuanced realities of global trade, where stability, trust, and mutual dependency are essential currencies of long-term success. The interplay between economic policy and energy markets is complex and multifaceted. In this instance, the strategic use of tariffs and the subsequent chain reaction among global energy producers and consumers unraveled a carefully balanced system, forcing every stakeholder to adapt to a new geopolitical reality. For energy market participants, this translated into an immediate need to reassess risk, invest in alternative supply chains, and forge new alliances in a landscape where political considerations had suddenly become paramount. The event revealed that relying solely on established trade patterns without accounting for geopolitical volatility can lead to dramatic and irreversible shifts in market leadership. This transformation in the LNG market also ignited a broader debate about the efficacy of protectionist policies as tools for economic revitalization. While some policymakers might argue that such measures are necessary to safeguard domestic industries and assert national sovereignty, the stark financial and strategic repercussions evidenced in this case suggest that the costs of such policies may outweigh their intended benefits. The rapid pivot away from US LNG imports not only disrupted revenue streams, but also sent a clear signal to international investors about the risks associated with unpredictable policy shifts. In an environment where confidence is a key driver of market behavior, any hint of instability can undermine long-held trading relationships and provoke a reassessment of strategic investments across the board. The implications of this event are far-reaching and multidimensional, underscoring the complexity of navigating an era characterized by both economic interdependence and geopolitical recalibration. The dramatic reordering of the LNG market, precipitated by the interplay of unilateral tariff policies and geopolitical maneuvering, serves as a powerful illustration of how national policy decisions can reverberate across global markets. It has thrown into sharp relief the delicate balance between protecting domestic economic interests and maintaining robust, mutually beneficial international trade relationships, a balance that, when disturbed, can lead to significant and lasting transformations in market leadership and economic stability. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on China halting US LNG imports after Trump's tariffs? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.